2 days passed in the blink of an eye. When the first rays of morning light tore through the darkness and illuminated the earth, the massive Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy suddenly erupted with excitement. Countless students had faces full of anticipation, and the entire academy was filled with an electrifying atmosphere. Today marked the grand event of the Great Thousand Worlds, the official start of the Spirit Academy Grand Competition. This was the highest-level competition of all spiritual academies, a place where countless talents gathered and clashed. Only those who stood out here were truly the elites among this vast sea of students. Although the young participants in the Spirit Academy Grand Competition could not represent the entire younger generation of the Great Thousand Worlds, no one doubted the caliber of the champion who emerged from this competition. After all, history had shown that many past champions of the Spirit Academy Grand Competition eventually became some of the most renowned and powerful figures in the Great Thousand Worlds. By the time the warm sun had risen high, the atmosphere in the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy was even more intense than the sun itself. Looking around, the academy was filled with a dense crowd. Even the higher-ups of the academy were out in full force, their faces barely able to conceal their excitement as they watched the scene. They all understood the immense significance of the Spirit Academy Grand Competition for the academy. Inside the headquarters of the Luo God Society, Chen adjusted his clothes. His robe was a soft shade of green, perfectly fitting his tall frame, making him look sharp and capable. On his chest was the academy's emblem, a towering pine tree standing firm on a mountain peak, its shape resembling a dragon-like creature ready to take flight and fight the heavens. This was the academy uniform of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Though usually not worn so formally, it was a sign of seriousness and pride as they represented the academy in the competition. Chen had a tall and graceful figure, and his handsome face was highlighted by a pair of black eyes that looked like the starry sky. Paired with his soft green robe, the youthful vigor he exuded was enough to captivate anyone's attention, and it was sure to stir the hearts of many young girls. Chen looked at himself with satisfaction before stepping out the door. Outside, the members of the Luo God Society had already gathered in a sea of people. When they saw Chen emerge, a wave of excitement erupted among them. Their eyes were filled with respect. Most of the members of the Luo God Society were from Chen's year, and it was Chen and Luo Li who had founded the society, protecting them from many oppressions. Now, with the fame they had earned in the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, it was all thanks to Chen's repeated battles. Therefore, every member of the Luo God Society respected him from the bottom of their hearts. Chen smiled at them, about to speak, when the door beside him creaked open. A beam of sunlight poured through the crack, and a pair of delicate white feet stepped out, moving gently along the sunlight. All eyes turned toward the girl who had stepped out of the room. The bustling noise suddenly died down as everyone's gaze widened. Even Chen's eyes flashed with astonishment. It was Luo Li who had emerged. The girl had changed into a different outfit, shedding the cold black dress she usually wore and instead donning a deep blue academy gown. The gown clung tightly to her slender frame, perfectly showcasing her graceful curves. Her long, snow-white neck, as elegant as a swan's, and the curve of her chest, wrapped in the gown, were both flawless. Her small waist was delicate and slender. Her usually soft, cascading black hair was now tied into a ponytail, which hung gracefully down her back. The girl stood gently in the beam of sunlight, her clear, glass-like eyes blinking, and a slight smile curved her rosy lips, causing many hearts to skip a beat. Chen stood there, unable to take his eyes off her. The girl before him was no longer the cold Luo Li he knew. With her ponytail tied up, she seemed to have gained the youthful vitality that a girl of her age should possess. This beautiful sight seemed to melt the sunlight itself. "Hey, what are you looking at?" Luo Li, noticing the numerous stunned gazes, felt her face flush slightly, especially when she saw Chen's unblinking stare. She bit her soft, white lip and looked down at her attire, a bit embarrassed. "Isn't it ugly? I'm about to drool." Chen wiped his mouth, then walked over to her. He extended his hand with a gentle smile, slightly bending down. Luo Li is the future queen of the Luo God clan, but in Chen's heart, this girl is also his queen. "You're such a bold knight. Someone like you would be punished in our Luo god clan, Luo Li said with a light smile. However, as she spoke, she obediently extended her delicate hand and gently held his warm palm, her red lips curling slightly. Roar! The members of the Luo God Society watching from the sidelines were struck by the sight of the handsome, upright young man and the stunning girl with a playful smile. They immediately cheered in excitement, their faces lit up with admiration. The boy and girl before them were the pride of their Luo God Society. Let's go, Mu Chen said with a slight smile to Luo Li. The two of them moved, transforming into rainbow light as they sped off. Behind them, countless members of the Luo God Society followed, soaring into the air, a massive wave of people trailing them. In the central area of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, the sky and ground were filled with crowds. As Mu Chen and Luo Li arrived, the crowd parted, creating a path for the dazzling young couple to pass through. Above the sea of people, the sky was open, and as Mu Chen and Luo Li approached, they saw Shen Songxing, Li Xiantong, Su Xian, and others who were already waiting. They, too, had changed into their academy uniforms. Their tall postures and delicate faces became the most radiant sight at the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. The appearance of Mu Chen and Luo Li instantly sparked a thunderous round of applause. At this moment, the two of them, who would soon represent the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy in battle, were clearly the true heroes in everyone's eyes. Sorry we're late, Mu Chen said with a smile to Shen Songxing and the others. Shen Songxing and the others smiled back, but their gazes were all unconsciously drawn to Luo Li, standing beside Mu Chen. Their eyes brightened, and even Su Xian couldn't help but be slightly in awe. The girl before them was simply too captivating. The future queen of the Luo God clan seemed to be slowly revealing all her brilliance. At this moment, the headmaster of Taitsong and the 5 elder seats appeared in the sky. The Taitsong headmaster gazed at the upright young man and girl before him, unable to hold back a smile. His expression soon became serious as the excitement within the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy began to quiet down. Fellow students, these are the most outstanding students of our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. From this moment on, they will step into the brutal battlefield to fight for the glory of our academy and protect the pride of our 5 great academies. So, they are our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy's heroes. The powerful voice of the Taitsong headmaster resonated throughout the sky, and countless students' faces flushed. Their blood boiled within them, and they looked up at the 10 figures in the sky with excited eyes. So, regardless of the outcome, let us cheer for our heroes. Taitsong headmaster smiled slightly. He then bent his body slowly toward the 10 young figures in the sky. Behind him, the elders also smiled and bowed lightly, sending their blessings to these young warriors who would soon fight for the honor of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. A uniform sound echoed through the sky as countless students gently bent forward, their heads lowered. Though their faces were young and innocent, they were filled with passion. The sight before them made them yearn to cultivate even harder, hoping that one day they, too, could gain such an honor. In the sky, Mu Chen, Shen Songxing, and the others looked at this scene with a surge of excitement in their hearts. They exchanged smiles and slowly bowed in response to the countless students below. Return to formation. Taitsong headmaster smiled and said. Mu Chen and Shen Songxing waved their hands lightly, and their figures gathered behind them. Naturally, Luo Li, Su Huang, Zhao Qingshan, and Mu Fengyang stood behind Mu Chen, while Shen Songxing's group was joined by Li Xiantong, Su Xian, He Yao, and Yang Lin. The two teams represented the elite forces of this batch from the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Prepare the teleportation spirit array. At Taitsong headmaster's command, Lingxi moved gracefully, raising her jade hand. A massive pillar of light descended from the sky, and within it, streams of spiritual energy swirled, forming a massive teleportation spirit array. The surging waves of spiritual energy spread outward. After the array was set, Lingxi stepped forward toward Mu Chen. She smiled slightly at him and Luo Li and said softly, "Be careful." "Don't worry, Lingxi." Mu Chen nodded with a smile. Lingxi looked at the handsome young man before her, his bright eyes and strong posture surely capturing the hearts of countless girls. She couldn't help but shake her head and laugh, saying, "The teleportation spirit array is ready." Mu Chen took a deep breath upon hearing this and nodded heavily. Shun Songxing glanced at Mu Chen, took the lead, and stepped forward with a smile. "Mu Chen, we'll go ahead. See you at the grand competition. I hope we both make it to the final showdown. Let's go." With that, Shun Songxing waved his hand, a look of arrogance appearing on his determined face. His figure darted forward, leading Li Xiantong and the others across the sky. Amidst countless excited gazes, they rushed into the massive teleportation spirit array. The light surged, and their figures vanished. "We're off too." Mu Chen gave a low shout, and behind him, Luo Li, Su Huang, Zhao Qingshan, and Mu Fengyang also tightened their expressions. The five of them swiftly followed, rushing into the teleportation spirit array right behind Shin Songxing and his group. At this moment, the entire Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy was in a frenzy. Grand Song Academy headmaster exhaled deeply as he watched the academy's excited commotion. His eyes lingered on the fading teleportation array, murmuring, "From here on out, it's up to you all. I hope that when the final showdown arrives, we'll see our Northern Heaven Academy's team." At the same time that Mu Chun and Shun Songxing entered the teleportation spirit array, the same scene unfolded across countless other spiritual academies, filling the air with a deafening roar. Sacred Spirit Academy. Massive, towering halls stretched across the land, and at the very center of the region lay a vast, holy white square. Surrounding it was a sea of people, and the overwhelming cheers rose to the heavens. In the middle of the square stood 20 figures, all dressed in white robes with the Sacred Spirit Academy's emblem on their chests. These individuals were the focus of everyone's attention. At the front of the team on the far left, a tall young man stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He had a remarkably handsome face, and on it was a warm, sunlight-like smile. The smile was calm and composed, elegant and graceful, causing many girls to lose their senses. Captain Jixian, it looks like you're still the most popular," said another young man, also standing behind Jixian, grinning. The other three captains must be quite displeased. They've been jealous for a long time that you, as a freshman, could get the same status as them. I think you should challenge them. I'm curious to see which of the four top figures in Sacred Spirit Academy is truly the strongest. The young man called Captain Ji Xian smiled gently in response. "Mu Feng, stop talking nonsense. We're all here to represent Sacred Spirit Academy in the competition. We'll need to rely on each other, so infighting is out of the question. Besides, they're all seniors, and I naturally can't compare to them. Captain is so magnanimous." Mu Feng, the young man, smiled and gave a thumbs up. "By the way, I heard that every academy this year has sent out their most elite students. So this year's Spiritual Academy Grand Competition is bound to be the most fiercely competitive in years. Captain, are you confident about winning the top spot?" Ji Xian glanced at him and simply smiled before saying softly, "Just follow my lead. You won't have to worry about not having the chance to appear in the final showdown. But I hope that when the time comes, my orders will be executed perfectly. Otherwise, for the greater good, I might not be able to show much leniency." His voice, though soft, carried an unquestionable confidence. It wasn't mere bravado. He truly had the capability to back it up. After all, he was one of the four great saints of Sacred Spirit Academy this year, and the first freshman in recent years to earn the title of Holy Son. The title of Holy Son represented the highest achievement in Sacred Spirit Academy, and only the most gifted could attain it. Mu Feng and the other three team members saw the smile on Ji Xian's handsome face, and their expressions stiffened for a brief moment before they smiled in response. Though they were older students, they didn't dare to put on airs in front of Ji Xian, as they knew very well what kind of person he was. This young man, younger than them by a few years, appeared gentle and smiling, yet his methods were truly ruthless. Each year, only 4 students earned the title of Holy Son, and to claim the title, one had to defeat one of the existing Holy Sons. Ji Xian had earned his position by defeating the previous Holy Son in battle, rendering him seriously injured and unable to recover his strength. "Captain, it seems like you've been gathering information on the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy recently. That academy is practically falling out of the top 5 academies. Is it really worth your attention?" Mu Feng chuckled as he shifted the topic. The Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Ji Xian raised his head, gazing in a particular direction, and smiled faintly. It's just where my rival is. Oh, Mu Feng and the other 3 team members froze in surprise. From what I've heard, he's been thriving at the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Heh, no wonder he's the one who defeated me multiple times in the Spirit Road. Ji Xian chuckled softly, but there was a cold, blade-like sharpness in his black eyes. Mu Feng and the others were slightly shaken. They had witnessed Ji Xian's terrifying strength, and from his tone, it seemed that this rival was someone who had entered the Spirit Road as a new student at the same time as Ji Xian. What's more, this person had even managed to gain the upper hand over Ji Xian. Too bad. In the end, the one who won was still me. Ji Xian shook his head, his gaze turning to the sky. With his hands behind his back, he smiled and said, "But the Spirit Road was just a small skirmish. I'm sure we'll meet again in the Spirit Academy Grand Competition. I really want to see what level that Spirit Road Blood Calamity Instigator has reached now. How interesting. But, Mu Chen, I hope you won't disappoint me. Otherwise, it'll be really boring." Boom. The sound of a bell rang through the air, and the teleportation spirit array in the plaza suddenly burst into brilliant light. The 4 teams on the plaza all had their gazes fixed at that moment. In the lead of the 3 teams on Ji Xian's right, 3 young men slowly opened their half-closed eyes. Their expressions were indifferent, and without saying anything, they stepped forward, leading their respective teams and stopping outside the teleportation spirit array. Ji Xian also led his team forward, giving a slight smile to the leaders of the other 3 teams as they reached the edge of the teleportation array. Ji Xian, our Sacred Spirit Academy's goal is to claim 4 of the top 8 spots. I hope you don't fall behind. One of the 3 young men, who had an ordinary face but lips as sharp as blades, smiled at Ji Xian. Then, with a lift of his foot, he entered the teleportation array. The light enveloped him, and his figure disappeared. The other 2 teams remained silent, their presence growing colder as they stepped into the teleportation array. Who falls behind? That's still hard to say, Ji Xian muttered, watching them vanish into the teleportation array. He flicked his sleeve lightly, a playful smile curling on his lips. He then led his team into the array, their figures disappearing amidst the burst of light, drawing the attention of countless onlookers. 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy. Compared to the atmosphere of the other spirit academies, the 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy was filled with the sounds of numerous young women, their soft voices filling the air, making the atmosphere feel almost tender. On the towering platform paved with flowers, surrounded by a sea of graceful figures, countless girls gathered. The fragrance of flowers filled the air, and at that moment, all the gazes of the young women were focused on the front of the platform. There, a slender, stunning figure caught everyone's attention. It was a dazzling young woman, clad in golden battle armor. The soft, form-fitting armor clung to her figure, revealing every perfect curve, her snow-white neck, full and delicate chest, slender waist, and long, graceful legs beneath her battle skirt. All of it was flawlessly stunning. She also possessed a face that seemed to hold the essence of the heavens, her hands like delicate willow shoots, and her skin as smooth as fine jade. Her beauty was beyond compare. Her slightly curled lips always held a confident and proud smile, her brows slightly raised, exuding a hint of heroic spirit. She looked like a goddess of war, controlling everything around her. This girl was like a phoenix, noble, proud, confident, and never willing to bow to anyone. Such a woman held a uniquely magnetic charm. It wasn't just a draw for men but also for women, as could clearly be seen from the burning, intense gazes of the girls surrounding the platform. Under the watchful eyes of countless spectators, the girl slightly tilted her delicate face upwards, her mind flashing with images. It was the end of the Spirit Road, a place where kings fought for the throne. Those who reached this point were all considered rare prodigies. In the area closest to the Spirit Crown, she wasn't alone. Several formidable opponents also stood there. One of them was Ji Xian. At that time, she was supposed to battle Ji Xian, but if she did, she would lose the best opportunity to seize the Spirit Crown. As she hesitated, a dark silhouette flashed past her, intercepting Xian. What followed was an intense battle, resulting in both sides being wounded. Her path to the Spirit Crown was cleared. She eventually won the Spirit Crown, and as she cast a glance at the black-dressed girl who had fought Xian to a standstill, her eyes sparkled. The girl, with her stunning beauty and glass-like eyes, was mesmerizing in their clarity. Even though she and Xian had both been injured, that serene face showed no signs of disturbance. This was the first time when Xian had encountered a peer who could match her, and she really liked it. Later, she learned the girl's name was Luo Li, and she had joined the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Buzz! In front of her, the enormous teleportation spirit array suddenly burst with dazzling light. The brilliance snapped when Xian out of her thoughts. She smiled, and her expression was so radiant that it seemed to make the world lose its color. She gracefully waved her hand, ignoring the deafening screams surrounding her, and stepped into the light. Her long fingers curled lightly, her smile alluring yet confident. Luoli, you are mine. At the same time, Martial Spiritual Academy, Azure Sky Spirit Academy, and other top-tier spiritual academies with formidable strength. Each teleportation spirit array erupted in dazzling light, and groups of powerful teams disappeared into the light amid the cheers of countless excited onlookers. They would soon appear on the battlefield of the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition. There, the winds of change would gather, and the contest would be as fierce as a battle for supremacy. The eyes of countless spiritual academies would focus here. The light from the teleportation spirit array flooded Mu Chun and his team's vision, causing a slight dizziness from the transition. Fortunately, the disorientation didn't last long. They soon felt the spatial fluctuations stabilize, and the blinding light gradually faded away. The teleportation was almost complete. Mu Chun and his team were no novices. They quickly began circulating their spiritual energy to protect their bodies. On this unfamiliar battlefield, they had to remain cautious. If they slipped up, it would be a huge embarrassment. As they braced themselves, the light finally faded completely. Their vision cleared, revealing an unfamiliar world. It was a vast and desolate land, with no end in sight. However, the land was riddled with deep, bottomless chasms, as though the land had been torn apart by a fierce battle. The entire area had an ancient, desolate feel to it, with an air of timelessness. This had to be the Shattered Relic Continent, the battlefield for the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition. Mu Chun scanned the distance, then quickly looked away. It seemed they had appeared atop a massive rock, towering like a mountain. This rock wasn't just their platform, it was also shared by others. As Mu Chen's group looked around, beams of light began descending from the sky. As each beam dissipated, teams appeared in midair. In just a few minutes, over 100 teams had gathered on the rock. The teams immediately clustered together, eyes alert and wary as they scanned their surroundings. Powerful spiritual energy rippled around them, and some even held spiritual weapons, guarding their groups. Despite the appearance of nearly 1,000 people with no prior warning, the rock remained eerily silent. It seems like Shun Songxing and his team have separated from us. Luo Li whispered to Mu Chun, as they had not seen any sign of Shun Songxing's group nearby. Mu Chun gently nodded. He clenched his hand, and the shimmering academy token appeared in his palm. Within the token, a 10 floated, which likely represented their base score for the Spirit Academy Grand Competition. It seems every team starts with 10 points when entering here, Mu Chun said with a smile to Luo Li, Su Huang, and the others. What should we do now? Su Huang asked, looking at Mu Chun. As the team leader, it was clear they should follow Mu Chen's lead and decisions. Do we need to leave this place first? With so many teams gathered here, it might not stay peaceful, Zhao Qingshan whispered, sensing the tense atmosphere rising above the massive rock. Many people were eyeing each other with hostile glares. In this place, other teams were considered enemies unless they belonged to their own academy. Only by defeating others and taking their points could they stand out. Mu Chen looked around, noticing the growing greed in the eyes of some teams. He smiled slightly and said, "There's no rush. Here, big fish eat the small fish, and the small fish get eaten by the mud. This is the rule. To increase our score, we'll have to take points from other teams, just like everyone else. And right now, this is a good place for that. Are you planning to make a move?" Mu Fengyang asked, surprised. Clearly, he hadn't expected Mu Chen to act so quickly. Only we are from the 5 great academies, Luo Li said softly. Her clear gaze swept over the various teams, and she continued, some of these teams come from large spirit academies and have strong abilities, while others are no threat. But we must be careful, as some teams might secretly join forces against us. However, under normal circumstances, our chances of victory are extremely high. Mu Chen nodded with a smile. He could sense the tension building up around them, and some of the stronger teams were already unable to hold back. Their greedy eyes were beginning to target weaker teams. It was clear that the tense atmosphere was on the verge of breaking, and soon the brutal fighting of the Spirit Academy Grand Competition would begin in earnest. Mu Chen took a deep breath, as if he could smell the blood in the air. His black eyes began to gleam with a sharp, awakening edge. The youthful face that once looked refined now held a more solemn and murderous air. In this moment, he seemed a world apart from the gentle Mu Chen of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. The others, including Su Huang, noticed the subtle change in Mu Chen and were all slightly shaken. Luo Li's gaze lingered on Mu Chen's profile before she smiled faintly. This version of Mu Chen felt familiar to her, as it reminded her of the Mu Chen who had walked the spirit road. At that time, he had always been like this, cold and sharp, like a blade. Later, when they arrived at Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, the atmosphere there had subdued the sharpness in him. But now, the same youth who had once wreaked havoc on the spirit road was starting to release everything he had suppressed. What are you doing? Just as Mu Chen and the others were observing the changing atmosphere, a furious shout suddenly rang out not far from them. All eyes immediately turned in that direction. A team stood there, their faces filled with anger, staring at the team that was slowly surrounding them. The latter team wore cold smiles, their eyes gleaming with greed, clearly ready to take action. Hey, what are we doing? Just hand over your academy token. You should consider yourselves unlucky for encountering us, the Barbarian Spiritual Academy. The leader of the other team sneered. The overwhelming spiritual energy emanated from his body, revealing that he was at the late heaven-reaching stage. You must be dreaming, the 5 members of the surrounded team said with grim faces, their voices harsh. Attack! The Barbarian Spiritual Academy team coldly smirked, not bothering with further talk. The team they surrounded didn't even have a leader at the late heaven-reaching stage. They were practically offering their points on a silver platter. Letting them go would be an affront to the natural order. Boom. The powerful spiritual energy erupted, and the Barbarian Spiritual Academy team charged forward. When the spiritual energy erupted, a shockwave swept through the teams standing on the giant rock. The air grew thick with greed as the atmosphere instantly turned tense, and within moments, hundreds of spiritual forces burst out, rising into the sky, transforming the heavens into a kaleidoscope of colors. Boom, boom. Chaos erupted on the battlefield, as teams charged like wild tigers. Yet, rather than attacking the tougher opponents, they all simultaneously targeted the weaker teams from the spirit academies. Mu Chen's team stood on the outskirts, observing the chaotic battleground with calm expressions. His dark eyes flickered slightly, scanning the scene like a hunter, though he refrained from joining the fray. Are we not going to make a move? Mu Fengyang asked, itching to dive into the battle. Taking them down would waste too much time. Mu Chen smiled. Let's wait a little longer. The reshuffling isn't over yet. Oh. Su Huang and Zhao Qingshan exchanged looks, excitement gleaming in their eyes. They instinctively turned their gaze to the teams tearing through the battlefield, their leaders exuding spiritual energy that was even stronger than their own. But they weren't worried. Their team had Luo Li, who had already passed the physical body tribulation, and Mu Chen, whose terrifying combat prowess made even those who had survived the tribulation tremble in fear. Mu Chen remained calm, his team motionless. Compared to the chaotic battlefield around them, they stood out in eerie stillness. Other teams likely sensed the threat they posed, and for now, no one dared to focus their greedy eyes on them. Mu Chen knew this peace wouldn't last. Once the first phase of reshuffling ended, even if others didn't make a move on them, he would strike. In the Spirit Academy competition, all teams except for their own were enemies. As the chaos intensified, the battlefield quickly thinned. Teams, battered and bloodied, were thrown out, their scores plundered by the victors. Faces filled with fury and frustration glared at the stronger teams that charged through them. There are 6 teams at the top, probably from major spirit academies, Luoli said, eyes narrowing as she surveyed the battlefield. 2 of them come from the same academy, and they've been working together to take down others. Their leaders are stronger than those in the late heaven-reaching stage, though they haven't passed the physical body tribulation. They might have tried but failed. Luo Li's eyes swept across the battle, where 6 teams stood out in brilliance. These were the strongest teams, having defeated many others and claiming their scores. Among them, the 2 teams from the same academy were the fiercest, with even the other strong teams wary of them. Su Huang, Zhao Qingshan, and Mu Fengyang looked at Mu Chun with excitement in their eyes, eager to strike. If they're the strongest, then we should take them down first. Let the little fish feed on the scraps, and we'll feast on them. Mu Fengyang grinned, cracking his knuckles. Mu Chun lazily stretched and walked forward. As he moved, sharp, wary eyes turned toward him from the remaining teams in the area. When Mu Chun stepped out, the remaining teams in the region immediately cast wary, hostile gazes at him. Among them, the 6 strongest teams locked onto him the hardest. From the badge on his chest, they recognized him as part of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, one of the 5 great academies. Though Northern Heaven had fallen behind in recent years, ranking at the bottom of the 5 great academies, and some top-tier academies had surpassed it in strength, it was still one of the 5. A tiger may be thin, but its legacy still commands respect. No one would easily ignore such a powerful team. However, it wasn't Mu Chen's late heaven-reaching stage strength that made them nervous. It was the stunning girl in green behind him. Looks like it's all over now, Mu Chun said with a slight smile, gazing at the teams that had already finished their plundering, their pockets full. So what do you want? The 2 teams from the same Spirit Academy had gathered together by this point, their 2 captains surrounded by a powerful aura of spiritual energy. They were clearly stronger than those at the later stages of the heaven-reaching stage. Their eyes flashed before they sneered. What? Are you planning to play the role of the mantis stalking the cicada, while the yellow finch watches from behind? Mu Chen heard this and smiled gently before nodding honestly. The 2 captains were stunned for a moment when they saw Mu Chen's lack of disguise, but their expressions soon turned icy, and their eyes darkened as they said coldly, "Don't think that just because you're from the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, we're afraid of you. You want us to do your bidding? It won't be that easy. If you push us too far, you might not be able to handle us. Moreover, there are other academies around. If you 2 sides end up with mutual destruction, it'll be the perfect chance for others. I suggest you keep your eyes open and don't bite off more than you can chew, or you might choke." The members of the 2 teams had coldness in their eyes as well. Their captains, although they had failed during the physical body tribulation, were much stronger than those at the later stages of the heaven-reaching stage. While they couldn't take on the girl in the green clothes alone, teaming up to hold her off wouldn't be difficult. And with 8 other members on their side, they felt confident they could match the 4 members from the other team at the later heaven-reaching stage. If they got into a full-blown conflict and both sides suffered losses, the other teams would certainly pounce on the opportunity. They believed that the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy's team would panic under such pressure. Meanwhile, for other strong teams in the distance were watching with glinting eyes, smirking with cold amusement. Some even crossed their arms, watching Mu Chun and his team mock the other weaker teams earlier. They had been keeping an eye on the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. The academy's name was quite intimidating, and it did give them some pause. But after analyzing their strength, they secretly relaxed. The lineup of 1 who had passed the physical body tribulation and 4 at the later heaven-reaching stage was the strongest among them. But unfortunately, this strength likely wouldn't be enough to overcome all of their teams. They weren't going to simply hand over their spoils. Moreover, this Mu Chun was truly too foolish. He walked up and spoke in a tone that seemed to target all of them. Now, they were all annoyed. If the 2 teams fought each other to a standstill, they would definitely consider taking advantage of the situation, feeling how comfortable it was to ride on the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy's back. Behind Mu Chun, Su Huang, Zhao Qingshan, and Mu Fengyang were about to step forward, anger flashing in their eyes at the threatening words from the 2 teams. They glared at the mocking gazes from the other teams. But Mu Chun raised his hand to stop them. "So you're worried that our stomachs are too small? Chen chuckled lightly, shaking his head. His brow furrowed as he stared at the two teams in front of him. A cold glint began to form in his black eyes. But even if we eat a few of you, we'll still be fine. You overestimate yourselves. What did you say? You're asking for death. The two teams' expressions turned ashen, and their eyes turned hostile, with spiritual energy surging around them. Chen looked at the agitated teams and grinned, his sharp, white teeth showing, exuding a cold air. He took a step forward, and with a deafening boom, his figure vanished from his original spot with lightning speed. Boom. In the same instant, a violent burst of spiritual energy swept through the two teams like a storm. Four young men at the mid-heaven reaching stage were sent flying backward, coughing up blood, their bodies crashing violently. The crowd on the giant rock was stunned, their faces changing drastically as they looked at the young man who had appeared among the two teams. His handsome face wore a smile, and his arrival sent a chill down their spines. This speed was too fast. It was impossible for someone at the later heaven-reaching stage to achieve such a thing. And with just one strike, four people had been wounded under the eyes of the two captains. The two captains immediately snapped back to their senses, roaring in anger, and then, in unison, they clenched their fists tightly. Their bodies shone with a golden light, their skin appearing as if forged from gold. With one powerful punch, the air erupted with a loud crack, and even the ground beneath them cracked open. These two were capable of becoming captains due to their formidable strength. Their synchronized strikes made their punches immensely powerful, and it seemed that even a strong opponent who had passed the body tribulation would have a hard time contending with them. However, the opponent before them was a monster who, even in the early heaven-reaching stage, had once slain a cultivator who failed the spirit tribulation. The violent spiritual energy created a fierce wind, making Chen's clothes rustle. However, he looked at the brutal punch, and with a slight smile, he clenched his own fist. Without any attempt to dodge, he stepped forward, his arms striking out like spears. Boom! Black lightning flickered from Chen's arms, distorting the space where his punch passed. Bang! In the next moment, the four fists collided with a thunderous crash. The wild spiritual energy swept like a storm, and the unlucky members of the nearby teams were knocked back, struggling to maintain their balance. What followed was their astonishment as they saw the faces of their captains flush with a strange crimson hue. Puffed. The two captains spat out a mouthful of blood, the blood mist swirling around them. Their upper garments were shredded by the immense force, and their bodies were sent flying, skidding across the ground for over 100 meters, leaving deep ruts in the earth. As the two captains were sent flying, the tall figure in front of them remained as still as a rock, unmoving. The atmosphere around the boulder became dead silent. The other teams, who had been sneering and watching the two tigers fight, suddenly froze. Their faces were filled with disbelief as they saw the young man, who was supposed to be at the late heaven-reaching stage, land a single blow that heavily wounded two captains of similar strength to themselves. How is this possible? Such strength, even a cultivator who has passed the body tribulation would struggle to achieve. How could someone at the late heaven-reaching stage do this? The expressions of the surrounding teams changed, and the mocking smiles on their faces quickly vanished. Their eyes were filled with shock. Chen slowly retracted his arms, which had been thrust out like spears, and lightly shook his sleeves. His black eyes coldly swept over the two disheveled captains, and he muttered, "Do you really think you have the qualification to fight us to a standstill?" This time, the two captains didn't retort. They merely wiped the blood from the corners of their mouths, exchanging a glance. From the look in each other's eyes, they realized the truth. This boy had been pretending to be weak. With such strength, how could he be merely at the late heaven-reaching stage? "Hand over the academy tokens." Chen extended his hand and said flatly. The two captains gritted their teeth, their palms glowing. 2 academy tokens appeared in their hands. Chen waved his sleeves, pulling the tokens toward him. With a glance, he noted that their combined score was nearly 100. He took out his own academy token and without hesitation scanned it. Instantly, the score on his token increased from 10 to 65. Chen casually tossed the 2 tokens back. According to the rules, the same token could only be deducted once per day, which served as a protective measure to prevent unfortunate individuals from being eliminated too quickly. And you? Mu Chen's gaze turned cold as he looked at the other powerful teams. He smiled faintly and said, "Do you think we'll be overwhelmed?" The teams that had been waiting for Mu Chen's team to exhaust themselves in a fight suddenly exchanged glances. They then sighed in resignation. What mutual destruction were they talking about? This guy alone had taken down two teams of similar strength. Clearly, the two sides were not on the same level. Any further resistance would only lead to a beating. They gritted their teeth and reluctantly threw their academy tokens out. The weaker teams, who had previously been robbed by these powerful teams, watched this scene with great satisfaction. Mu Chen swept through all the scores on the academy tokens, and in an instant, his own token's score skyrocketed to 440 points. TSK, this feels great. Su Huang and the others also checked their tokens, grinning at the sudden surge in their scores. Mu Chen played with his token, smiling as well. Just as he was about to leave, a burst of light suddenly erupted from the token in his hand. Mu Fengyang exclaimed, "The top 16 rankings have appeared. Damn, are these guys insane?" Hearing this, Mu Chen's gaze immediately shifted to his token. The light gathered, and sure enough, the top 16 rankings appeared. His pupils shrank as he scanned them. First place, 10,000 Phoenix's Spiritual Academy, Captain Wenqing Xian, 2,530 points. Second place, Sacred Spirit Academy, Captain Ji Xian, 2,000 points. Third place, Martial Spiritual Academy, Captain Wu Ling, 1,800 points. Sixth place, Sacred Spirit Academy, Captain Chao Gang, 1,400 points. Ninth place, Desolate Spiritual Academy, Captain Ji Qingtian, 1,000 points. 16th place, Myriad Sword Academy, Captain Yin Xiu, 820 points. Mu Chen stared at the rolling numbers on the token, narrowing his eyes. These guys really shot up fast. He thought he was fast, but he hadn't even made it into the top 16.